Jonathan, this is going to be a really dope episode because you are kind of like my spirit person. You know, some people have a spirit animal. I have a spirit person. We actually started chit-chatting because of our love for travel. And this is going to be a great episode for people to learn all about all things digital nomad life and travel. But I think we first should start at the beginning, let the audience get to know you a little bit. So why don't you just share a little bit with us about who you are, where you're from, you know, what kind of upbringing you had? Like, yeah.
Lauryn, I am so excited to be here. Thank you for having me on. And I'm excited to share as much that I can. So I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. Sisters 18 months apart, very close in age. Mother, father, wonderful people. My dad was a drug and alcohol addictions counselor for 35 years. Guy's got a heart of gold. He saved lives just through conversation.
Yeah.
My mother has been a nurse, a caretaker, loving person. Unfortunately, neither of them was really money-minded. So it kind of set the stage for what I do for a living as a financial planner. They are really my why. Growing up in that household, seeing what it's like to be a beautiful human being doesn't always translate to the money side of things. And it's created a real soft spot for helping people who are good human beings, but are just not money-minded. So my parents are my inspiration, and growing up under that household, I think instilled a lot of lessons around money and life.
Yeah, I love how you brought that together, the idea that people are not their money decisions. They are who they are, which it can be a truly wonderful and intelligent human being. Because I think there's a lot of narratives and language around, oh, I don't know money, so I'm stupid. I'm stupid because blah, blah, blah. You know, people use that language, or, you know, ignorant. It's like, no, you just don't know this piece of the puzzle. Like, I don't know very much about medicine. I don't know very much about a lot of things in life, but wonderful people can have really bad financial kind of literacy. And that's the whole reason that this podcast exists, is because you're not a bad person, whoever's on the other end listening to us. You are just trying to learn more about this money thing that doesn't come natural to you.
Yeah, you nailed it. Self-worth is an interesting dynamic. Like and especially in Western society, because I've lived in other countries and I've seen how the West kind of operates and the values in the Western culture. And Western culture, you know, we line up our self-worth in line with our net worth. And those two, you know, self-worth plays out in a lot of different ways. So you nailed it. You know.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about your parents and how they, spoke to you about money. Was there like a piggy bank in your life? Was there allowance? Were there chores? What kind of like money interactions were you having as it relates to being a little kid and working with your parents?
The extent of my financial education from my parents was yes and no. Hey, can I have this? Thing? No. Can I have this? Okay, fine. That was it. And this is not to bash them. They're beautiful, amazing people, but they can't give what they were never given. So they never got an education around this stuff. So it's hard to give what you can't, you never received yourself. So no, I never really got an education around money. It was a lot of watching them grind through life in a lot of different ways and saying, all right, I don't want to repeat that pattern. The motivation was from watching and learning and, wanting to live a life of, I think, options rather than limitations. My parents, it was a lot of limitations. Everything we wanted to do to treat ourselves as a family was never without stress, arguments. It was just a grind, I think, is the short way of saying it.
Yeah. I think a lot of people can relate to that. There's not having those money conversations in the household. And like you said, limiting beliefs versus like beliefs of abundance and conversations related to abundance and kind of creating what it is that is necessary in order to be able to, feel financially savvy. Let's talk a little bit about your first time earning income. What was your first job?
My first job was at Pets Hotel, which is like the boarding, component of PetSmart. So I'd walk Rottweilers and dogs, and it was just, that was my minimum wage first job, 15 years old.
Did you have aspirations of being like a veterinarian or something like that? Is that why you chose that job? Or
no, my dad was like, you need to get out and get a job. So that was the first one I got. I love animals, and it kind of worked out to get a job at PetSmart. And it was interesting too. Some dogs can't, I'm 6'4". Some dogs can't be walked by tall people. They can only be walked by women. It was very interesting learning the different animals and their tendencies and how their personality quirks are similar, like humans have similar personality quirks. But yeah, that was the first job, just kind of making minimum wage and getting myself out there. I think the more fun job came in high school. About a year later, I got a job at a magic shop. So we were doing magic tricks for customers, selling Halloween costumes year round. I don't know if you're familiar with LARPing, but we were selling like costume and makeup for these people who would dress up at like Comic-Con, Dragon Con. We get a lot of those folks. So a bit on the nerdy side, but it was like a really fun, peculiar group. So that was my high school job. But the narrative was kind of the same between the two. It was just kind of making minimum wage and getting by.
Were you a spender, or like you started to earn your own money? Did you have to like contribute to the household in that regard, or was it like I just need to be able, you need to be able to take care of your own things? Like what kind of money narrative started to form based on you now earning your own money and having the ability to do something with it?
Great question. Definitely a saver. My dad was the kind of guy, and he still does this. He'll brag about, you like these pants, Jonathan? Yeah, they're nice pants. Yeah, I got them for $3 at Goodwill. So he just gets stoked about, not spending or spending as little as possible. My mom was more of a spender, and my dad was more of a saver. My dad grew up in a household with not much income, and he really clung to whatever he had. And my mother, I think that ties into self-worth issues and spending for different reasons there. So they did kind of have a different dynamic, but ultimately I'm more of a saver myself. That scarcity mindset is one that I have worked on for years to embrace more of abundance mindset. But that was definitely it, clinging to every little bit that I had. Sometimes to too much excess. Yeah.
Ooh, and we've talked about that a lot on the podcast because there's kind of a lot of conversations around people being spenders and, needing to be better savers, and Americans in general being consumers. But there are people out there that are very, very good savers to a fault. To the point where they are operating from a position of scarcity, or somehow inhibiting their life and their overall quality of life because they're doing too much saving. So that's interesting that you say that.
Yeah, it really is. Just watching how my parents' money story and how it influenced me, and how this stuff is just so generational in nature. But we absolutely have the ability to break that pattern. We have more knowledge out there and resources available to us than ever before. So it's an exciting time to be alive. We have the ability to not only recognize these patterns generationally, but also break them. And that's pretty cool. It's a good time to be alive in that respect.
Yeah, we got to start breaking these chains, people. Let's start it.
That's right.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about what happened life after high school. What were your plans? Were you planning to, go to college, go to the military, start working immediately? What was the initial, while you were in high school, the conversation about what needed to happen? Because kind of 18 is that like first set of adulting that happens. And then there's like 21, 25, blah, blah, blah. But what were you thinking?
That's right. Always knew it'd be college. I wanted to go to college. It was just a known thing. I was going to go to college. What also was a known thing is that I was going to pay for college myself. My grandparents set aside, I think, like a couple grand, but my parents just, ended up having to spend that on bills and things like that. So I knew going into it, I'd have to self-fund. And that built a lot of character. Throughout college, I worked 30 plus hours a week, having to pave my own way financially. And it really, having skin in the game, created a lot of character. And I developed even though it was a lot of stress at the time, managing full-time schedule and 30 hours a week, it built character, and I learned a lot of life lessons, and learned the value of a dollar more than ever before as well.
Oh, I think you bring up such a great point about, I know my 17-year-old self was not as well versed as my 30 something self. But this idea that, your parents have taken care of you for, 18 years ish, and then you move on to college. And now with the evolution of student loans and scholarships and things like that, sometimes students aren't fully aware that there's a cost related to college, that, maybe you went to a public school growing up, you went there every day, but there was no cost related to it. Or maybe your parents didn't fully help you understand that you went to private school and there was a cost related to that. And now, there's also a cost related to college, but that the cost is the responsibility of the person going to college at that point. So whether it's student loans or, like I said, scholarships, et cetera, you could end up in a situation where you have to figure that out for the rest of your life, as you go forward. But maybe they weren't fully aware of what was happening, and the expense related to it. And so having to actually have that skin in the game work to be able to go to school, I know it would make me show up to class. Like, if I'm paying for this, then I need to get good grades. I need to make sure, where some people might be a little bit detached and they're like, I'm just going to have a good time in college. They don't maybe feel the cost related to it, or like I said, don't have that skin in the game.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Skin in the game. What is that saying? Necessity is the mother of invention.
Yeah.
If I'm not butchering that. Yeah, I think that's the saying. And that's absolutely what happened. Having skin in the game, knowing that my parents were going to cover this, I had to do the math. How many hours a week do I need to work to cover the cost of tuition? How do I need to balance that time management wise with a full-time work schedule? And then at what point am I comfortable taking on debt? I resisted stubbornly taking on any kind of debt. I was going to will myself through college without paying any student loans. Well, my last couple of years, I bit the bullet and I said, I want to enjoy college. I don't want to work my entire college experience away. So I took on some loans, but I was able to get out of my bachelor's with about $7,000 of loans. And I paid that off aggressively about a year and a half later. So yeah, debt averse. You grow up under your parents and always having revolving credit card debt. You're like, I ain't falling in that trap. So
right. You're like, that's where you started to kind of like turn and say, I want something different than what I've seen up to this point. Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you major in?
Finance.
Oh.
Started out with marine biology, but I kind of did a little more research and realized that they didn't make the level of income that I'd like to. And I did, again, kind of money story with the parents. I didn't want to fall back into a space of limitation. So I chose finance knowing I wanted to help people with money kind of from the get-go. So yeah, I think it happened pretty organically.
Interesting. So tell us what happens then, life after college.
Yeah, after college. So I took a conventional path for the first 2.5 years. And then when it all went off the rails after that. So graduate college, worked 2.5 years at a fee-only financial planning practice in Atlanta, Georgia. I was doing that 9 to 5 office commute. And, I was commuting an hour each way in traffic. If you've ever been to Atlanta, the traffic is pretty intense. And I passed the CFP exam in that time. So I felt like I got myself set up well professionally. But about 2.5 years in, I felt myself wanting more. I passed the CFP exam. That was months of my life I'm not getting back. I positioned myself well in my career. But I felt myself with desire personally. There was a professional ambition, but there was also a personal ambition. I'd always wanted to live abroad, experience other cultures. So 2.5 years after being in that practice, getting great work experience and doing that commute, I realized conventional office life and the 9 to 5 commute was not for me personally. So I quit my job and I moved to Australia.
You quit your job and you moved to Australia.
That
is a turn of events. That's not very linear. Like college, nice little stable 9 to 5, and now hard left, Australia.
Off the rails. That's right. And boy, did that change my life. My values changed. My vision for my own life changed. Traveling solo will change you in very real ways, and in ways I probably still haven't unpacked. So I think at the core of this, though, it does stem back from childhood. Freedom is what I was after. I've had to unpack this with my therapist, actually. as a child, my parents didn't have freedom. There was always, can we do this? Can we not do that? You know, it's just limitation after limitation. And I finally was in a position where I was making, you know, an okay big boy salary for first years out of college. And I built up some savings and I said, I'm going to be free. So I quit my job and I moved to Australia. I ended up spending 9 months there, but this was the beginning of a 15-month trip abroad. That 9 months in Australia, I worked as a waiter. My first job in Australia was actually as a carny. I was working at a carnival. Going from a financial planner in Atlanta with my own office to working at a carnival was such a funny shift. But I spent 7 months living in Surfer's Paradise, was the name of the city. And I lived there on the working holiday visa. And the last 2 months of that 9-month trip, I lived in a camper van going up and down the east coast of Australia. So this experience shaped me from a minimalism standpoint. It helped me realize how little we really need and how so many experiences in life are actually free. Don't get me wrong, it costs money to get the plane ticket to get to Australia. It costs money to buy that camper van. But really, once those things were provided for, relationships with people, experiences, going for a drive, a lot of the things in life that we value most are either free or can be obtained relatively cheaply. So I think that shaped me, though, to shift away from materialism of like things and more towards experiences.
Yeah. This is an amazing story. So I have so many questions. Like you said, you have the normal, what's it called? I guess the cushy or comfortable 9 to 5, if you will. You have some savings and you head over to Australia. So the one thing I do know about Australia is not a place I've made it to yet, but that it's more expensive than America to live. Then you mentioned being a carny, which I didn't know there was a short term for that.
There is,
for those carnival people. And I imagine that didn't pay as well as the job that you had just left. So you're in a higher cost of living place, making a lower income. You know, you had some savings, but did you drain the savings? Did you, kind of get down to the wire a little bit at any point?
So glad you asked. Within 1 month of arriving in Australia, I went with my best friend from college. After a month of arriving, I showed up with $6,000. And after 1 month, I had $300 in my account. He had 88 cents. Because we were unemployed at the time, we had to front 3 months of rent for our apartment. Whoa. And that moment, we were just living off of, and the kicker is we got there and it wasn't the busy season. And we learned that once we arrived, that there were no jobs to be had. So we had about a month and a half of just living off of our income and living off of our savings. And it just drained the savings because I had to pay up front for not only him, but myself as well to nail that apartment down, prepaying 3 months of rent. So that was also a very nerve-wracking time where you're almost out of money. You're in a foreign country. But I was convinced, we've got to make this work. And just in the nick of time, I got a job as a waiter at a restaurant. They gave me 5 measly hours a week, but in Australia, they pay $20 an hour. So that was nice. Yeah. And we were just, for the first month, that money drained. We almost ran out. The next month, we just treaded water. I'm talking $100 to $300 in our accounts, like combined.
This is like the beans and rice, oodles and noodles budget.
Beans and rice. Our splurge was the $2 steak special on Tuesdays. And even then I was like, okay, I'll maybe get 2 and splurge a little bit. And after a month, started earning more hours, and then the pressure alleviated, and then I started making a good bit of money as a waiter, and I was able to buy the camper van and accrue $11,000 in savings in addition to the camper van in about 6-7 months. So that funded the remaining 8 months of my travel, which took me through 3 months in Southeast Asia. It was 1 month in the Philippines, 1 month in Australia. 1 month in the Philippines, 1 month in Thailand, and 1 month in Malaysia and Borneo. 2 months in California, and 1 month in Belize, where I paid not just for myself, but for my dad, who never really had much as a social worker. So this was my chance to give back. And we spent a month together as father-son, traveling through Belize.
Wow, what a cool experience.
Yeah.
All right. So many things to unpack here. A financial planner, some people are saying like, you knew financial stuff. How did you get down to $300?
Yeah.
What I'm hearing as part of this story is like, everybody is shaping life one day at a time, one experience at a time. And there's no right or wrong answers to, where you want to live, what you want to do, how you want to spend. And even a financial planner with all our financial knowledge and expertise can get low on money just because of circumstances, which is why financial planning is so important in general, is because simply having the knowledge doesn't prohibit you from ending up in a situation where, life is happening and it's affected financially by that. So you got down there, but you also, like you said, were able to rebound, move along, but you also changed your lifestyle overall. And it taught you some things about lifestyle. So am I getting that right into like the how it was unfolding for you?
You nailed it. Yeah. I will say this. I did have a reserve fund of $6,000. So still, but I left that piece out before, but I was refusing to touch it. That was like a don't touch. I'm going to make this work with what I had. And we did. We barely squeezed by. But if we really were about to be on the streets kind of thing, I could have gotten that money wired over. But I was doing my best to just not touch that.
But that also speaks to the importance of having an emergency fund as well. Is like there was a cushion that existed, but like you said, when is this really an emergency? And then also like what it pulled out of you to be able to say like, okay, I got to go earn more. I got to figure out how to earn additional dollars. Okay, so tell us a little bit about the South Asia piece of the puzzle that you just mentioned.
Yeah, it was very intriguing. In short, I lived the perfect life I'd always wanted to live. How do I say that? Every single perfect life. I don't really want to say perfect life, but it was that idealistic life. For an extended period of time, my whole life since I was, I guess, 15, and even before that, I was doing jobs. I was always working. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't working. I was unemployed. I was free to roam through Southeast Asia. I was going hostel to hostel, meeting people from all over the world. Every day was a different waterfall, a different hike, a different mountain, a different temple. All these new experiences were flooding my senses. And I just felt this high and level of self-independence that I had never felt before. And it was an incredible, exhilarating feeling. Travel is like a drug in a lot of ways, and like the chemicals that are shooting off while you're experiencing all these things. And I think it just, I think it was life-changing to experience those things. But here's what I didn't expect. 3 months later, I started getting bored.
Ooh.
Human beings are incredible. We adjust incredibly quickly. So while I was like, wow, this is amazing. I'm on cloud 9. I'm doing what I always wanted to do. I'm gallivanting across the world. Every day's a new experience, meeting amazing people, and I'm not having to work. I'm free. Like, this is the freedom my parents never had. I finally come full circle and got what they never got or were able to provide for themselves. Well, 3 months later, I found myself getting bored. And I think it comes back to a challenge. I think happiness is twofold. There is traditional happiness in the sense of doing fun things with people you enjoy. But then the other component of happiness is fulfillment, purpose. Running around Southeast Asia and kind of just enjoying myself only sustained me for so long before there was an emptiness there. And then I felt a compelling, like, what's my purpose? Like, I can only do this for so long before it becomes kind of empty. So that was insightful as well. I didn't expect to hit that wall.
Yeah, that is so interesting because there's so many people that are just like, I just want to be free. But there's different levels of freedom. And I think the narrative is like, everybody just wants to make a gazillion dollars, never go to work again, and like be on this forever vacation. But some of the most successful people are still showing up at work every day. And to your point, it's about the purpose, the inspiration, to feel like you're a member of society and that you're contributing something. I think people frequently get to a point, retirement. They go into retirement. They're just like, twiddling my thumbs, don't know what to do. You want to have the flexibility to be working because you want to, not because you have to.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you also, you got all your wits about you. My mom is actually going through this now. I talk to her every day about, like, she's like, well, I don't have anything to do today. I guess I can just make it up. And you can tell she's just 2 or 3 months into retirement, and she's not the kind of person that's going to sit around. She's looking for something that's fulfilling. So,
yeah,
I think it's a really good point.
Great segue.
I was
Yeah,
like,
I
I
definitely
was looking
agree.
at your points and I was thinking like, which one do I want to go to next? All right. So Asia sounded like it was wonderful, but you also were missing some purpose. So what did you decide to do to like make life a little bit more fulfilling instead of just be bopping around town forever?
Yeah, that's a great question. That actually sparked the next phase of life. So I traveled in total for 15 months on that trip. And I came back broke. Outside of that 6K emergency fund, which I will not, act like it's truly broke. I did have those savings to fall back on, but I came back outside of that emergency fund broke. And with this fresh perspective of, wow, these experiences have changed me. I want to travel more. Like I said, travel can be like a drug. And I wanted to experience more travel, but I still wanted to further myself in my career. So how could I have my cake and eat it too? How could I continue to further my career and have challenge, purpose, fulfillment, but also experience other cultures and do the things I love to do? Cue the digital nomad phase of life. I came back and I came on XYPN's website and I learned that the work that I did before as a paraplanner in financial planning, long story short, I learned that I could do that and be self-employed and work remotely, which back in 2015 was like, oh, wow, this isn't a very common thing to be able to work remotely. So it was like the moment I realized that the work I did before could be done remotely and I could work for myself. That was the moment that just the angels were singing, just like, oh, the epiphany. And I'm like, this is what I want. This moment of clarity, conviction. This is the lifestyle I'm after. So for the next year, I lived in my parents' living room, running my business out of my living room. I cold called over 500 financial planners to be able to find like basically 1099 paraplanning work for them. And at the end of a year, I was able to build up a full book of clients just doing all those cold calls. And that set the stage for Travel 2.0. I was going to experience the travel I had as a backpacker, but now I'm going to do it more sustainably. Now I'm going to have my cake and eat it too. I want experiences, but I want to do it in such a way that is sustainable and I can still work and further myself in my career. So I had spent the year living at home in my parents' living room, building up the business, built up a full book of clients, and then I moved to Medellin, Colombia, which I cannot say enough about. That place is absolutely incredible. Colombia in general is just a beautiful place. And that was actually the beginning of what was an 8-month trip as a digital nomad in South America. Ended up doing 6 months in Medellin, Colombia, and 2 months in Cusco, Peru.
Ooh, this is where you really start to speak my love language. So if you've listened to the most recent update, you know that I spent the month of July in Colombia. And I've been to Medellin multiple times.
Yeah.
And it is the place that I'm trying to like navigate my digital nomad life to slowly but surely. So
I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, can't say enough about how wonderful a city it is and just Colombia in general. I kind of bebop in and out on weekends to other cities in Colombia. And like you said, I've also started to explore other parts of South America, but it's great. It's so wonderful. So okay, yeah. Digital nomad life, you're doing it, you're 8 months in. What happened after the 8-month period? Well, maybe how did you get set up as a digital nomad? So you had to find a place to live, you had to figure out how to stay in that country for a period of time. Proper internet is a thing when you're a digital nomad. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about some of those pieces of the puzzle.
Definitely. First, I had to convince my clients that to be okay with this. So I actually consulted with a data security professional because, I got people's tax returns, other sensitive documents. And if I'm gallivanting across South America, like I need to make sure my stuff is locked down. So I got my hard drive encrypted, VPN, all these different measures to make sure everything was secure. I wrote up an intense data security policy to convince them like, all right, everything's going to be okay. Here's the game plan. If my laptop gets stolen, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, take step 1, 2, 3 measures. So I had a game plan in place around data security if this stuff was stolen. As far as internet goes, I just went from co-working space to co-working space, and that provided great internet. There's amazing internet you've probably seen in Medellin, Colombia. So it's way more doable than I think a lot of people probably assume.
Yeah. I think there's so many kind of stereotypes or perspectives out there, like Colombia in general. I have people all the time like, you're going to get kidnapped. Don't go there. I'm like, it's nothing like what you've seen on TV and movies, etc. Like there's a rich history of, pain where there is everywhere in the world. You can go back and look at history and there's some things that have happened, but simply viewing the world or a place through the scope of what's been shared for you via TV versus going to experience it for yourself, I think it just speaks volumes. Me getting to Colombia and just like, oh my goodness, this place is great. Like, why isn't everyone here? That, like you said, most people think they don't have internet over there. Like, yes, they absolutely do. Great internet, actually, and avocado toast as well. And it's
that's right. The avocados there are huge. I've never seen avocados that big in my life.
All right, so we've got a good digital nomad experience going. 8 months is what you mentioned. So I'm assuming something happened after that 8-month period.
Yeah, you nailed it. Something did happen. This was the next lesson in life: the power and importance of relationships. And I'm not just talking people coming in and out of your life. For 8 months, I was essentially a lone wolf. People would come into my life. We'd have a fun hike for a weekend, and then they would move on to the next location. And, in that 6 months in Medellin, Colombia, I created a little friend group, and it was a lot of work. Making friends is a lot of work. And for that 6 months, we were all there together. We built up this friend group, and about month 5 or 6, I felt I was really the loneliness. The loneliness is the biggest challenge with being a digital nomad. I felt like we were finally starting to overcome the loneliness in month 5 or 6. And then 6 months ends, our visas run out. Everyone shoots off to Europe, to all these different places, and I'm back alone again. So the next location was Cusco, Peru. And for 2 months there, people just come in to see Machu Picchu and they leave. And it was very hard to have friends with staying power. So here I was, 8 months after my digital nomad journey started, and it's my birthday. I'm alone, sick on my birthday. I call my parents. The loneliness is setting back in because I've lost my community in Medellin and I couldn't rebuild it all over again in Cusco. And I'm just like, man, Mom, I love you. I miss you. This is tough. I'm not going to lie. I'm finding that every new place I see is just as beautiful as the last. Each place is increasingly empty because I'm not sharing it with people I love. And that's the X variable that's missing with the digital nomad life. If you don't have a partner to do this with, I'm not going to say it can't be done. But for me, I really started missing relationships, people I've known for a long period of time. So that's what came. Yeah, that's really where it came back to, is shifting out of, okay, novelty and experiences are great, but relationships are the real currency of life. And I had to break down to be able to have that breakthrough. And that's kind of how it goes in breakdowns. And that was absolutely a breakdown moment. I'm sick, alone, cold in this apartment by myself. And after 8 months of this trip, and it was a breakdown moment, but those breakdowns are always followed by breakthroughs that typically are life-changing, behavior-changing, value-changing, and just shapes you. We're just Play-Doh, and we keep getting shaped by all these experiences.
Ooh, we are having church today. The breakdown that is going to lead to a breakthrough. I know somebody on the other end is like, yes, I'm in the middle of a breakdown right now. Never fear. There's a breakthrough coming for you. Yes.
That's right. That's right. Have hope. It's coming.
All right. So you get sad. You're like, I can't do this. What happens next?
So I moved back to Atlanta. I knew I wanted to live on the West Coast. I just come back to Atlanta after all these travels, and I realized there was a conflict of values between kind of Atlanta culture and all these travels I've been on. Atlanta's a great place. I just felt like I was more at home with the West Coast. The outdoor experiences, people are very well traveled out there. And that's kind of what led me to living in Tahoe. I spent the winter in Lake Tahoe. ski season. My idea was working, getting off by 2 p.m. and then going and skiing the slopes. I ended up working way more than that and didn't get to take advantage. But, you work hard during the week and then you ski on the weekends. And I got to experience that life for 5 or 6 months. And while I was in Tahoe, I'm like, okay, what's the next phase? I've done the backpacker travel thing. I've done the digital nomad thing. Now I'm going to go the complete opposite direction, because I went from unemployed backpacker, took on a little more responsibility as a digital nomad. Now I'm going to go even further to take on the most responsibility. I'm going to become a real estate investor. There's this kind of natural, and all these things, what they all have in common is the intention of freedom, creating more freedom. Now I'm going to own a rental property. I was listening to Bigger Pockets podcast. I wanted to create passive income, which is the sexy buzzword that millennials love. And, I started, and I realized like Atlanta was the price point and the place to do it. So I left Lake Tahoe and I moved back to Atlanta with the idea of getting into real estate, buying my first rental property. I'm not going to lie. I was a bit naive to think I could go back in 3 months, buy a property, then shoot back out west. I ended up spending an entire year in Atlanta, buying this rental property, getting it off the ground. It was way more involved than I anticipated it being.
Was it a single family home or multifamily?
It was a duplex.
Okay.
And I hate to say it, but it was in a lot of ways the rental property from hell.
Never talk about that on any of the
sorry if those are naughty words I shouldn't be using on the podcast, but it was a very oh my god, formative experience. In the first 4 months of owning that rental property, it caught on fire, it flooded.
What?
I'm telling you, the 7 plagues. It caught on fire, it flooded, there was a break-in attempt, there were gas leaks. My car was stolen outside the front of the house. There was a crazy cat tenant whose cat sprayed all over the downstairs, and I had to replace the flooring throughout the downstairs unit. It was just one thing after another. There was during the summertime, there was infestations of mosquitoes. You just got swarmed alive. So I could go into even other things, but those were kind of the highlights. And for the first time in my life,
I would call those low light.
Yeah, that's right. For the first time in my life, I experienced panic attacks. I was in over my head. I don't want to say I just willy-nilly walked into this stuff either. Like what I do, I'm thorough in everything I do. I researched the hell out of owning a rental property. I talked to tons of different mentors and experienced real estate investors. I did my homework. I got that house vetted with a contractor. I did all the things I'm supposed to do. But a lot of these repairs were concealed by the previous owner. And sometimes you just trip on landmines that you can't foresee, no matter how good your due diligence is. So all these things it was a mixture of, it was a black cat of a house. So it was a mixture of bad luck and just things that I couldn't necessarily avoid. So I learned my own risk tolerance. I was well above it. I was struggling to go to sleep each night. For the first time in my life, I could go to sleep and I could hear my own heartbeat. And if anyone's dealt with anxiety, it's not fun. And I didn't know if I was going to have a heart attack, what it was. But I learned through my travels that I had grown this sense of control over my life. I can stay where I want to stay tonight. I can live where I want to live. I own my own business. I can charge the rate I want to charge. This sense of control. And that rental property ripped that control away. And that lack of control was very triggering. And I was in over my head. Anxiety attacks came in. And I ended up hiring a property manager, which was it was a much needed thing. Was this property manager perfect? Did they take away all my stresses? Not at all. But they did help. And that made me learn. I tried to lone wolf everything in my life to that point. I tried to will myself to success. And that was the first time where I had to be humbled and say, I can't do this on my own. So I hired a property manager, and that took the pressure off me enough so that I could then say, all right, well, now I'm going to move back out to the West Coast like I originally envisioned. It was a year later, not 3 months like I planned. So a little idealistic there. But then I moved to San Diego. And I continued to manage the rental property with the help of the property manager. I did it from out of state in California, but it was just taking a toll on me. One thing after another kept going wrong. And managing a property out of state is not fun, and it's not easy. There's a reason why they say if you're going to own a rental property, be able to drive within 20 minutes of it. Out of state can be done, but I just didn't work well for me. So
to kind of get to like, do you still own the property?
2 years later, I sold it.
You couldn't take it anymore.
I couldn't take it anymore. My quality of life was falling. I was so stubborn about achieving passive income, financial independence by the time I'm 35. I had this whole vision after watching Bigger Pockets. But I ended up saying, you know what? My quality of life suffering, and that's what matters most. I sold the property, and get this, I actually got a 100% return on what I put into it and what I got out of it. I got 100% return in 2 years. So real estate investing is lucrative, but it's risky in a lot of ways as well. So I like to think of that as tainted money. I wouldn't have known that until I did it. Some things in life you won't know till you jump in. But I look at those profits as a bit tainted. I look back and I say, you know what? I could have raised my rate for what I do as a living, as a paraplanner. I could have raised my rate and made that kind of profit and done it that way through what I do in my regular day job. There's other ways I could have done that, which is passive, way less stress.
To an extent. Like I said, we kind of throw that word around, like you said, that passive income word, but raising your rates, you're doing the same work for raising your rates. It's just, this is what it costs to do, the cost of doing business. So
I love that.
Yeah, you said passive income. It is in that regard. Whereas real estate, I found it like nothing passive about it. If you've not listened to any of the episodes where I talk about my real estate woes, we'll drop those in the show notes too.
Yeah. We'll have a therapy session with one another, support group.
Right, exactly. All right. So there's this thing that you told me, you mentioned before, the formula for the best money that you've ever spent.
Yeah.
Drop that formula on us as we start to wrap up here today.
I'd love to. I think it's a formula for high impact spending. And I want to give some credit to Carl Richards. He's a great planner and he's kind of like the inspiration for the idea. But we talk about, okay, so what is high impact spending? It's a mixture of experiences plus the people you love. So a lot of money can fall through the cracks. My parents never budgeted. Money went into their checking account and was thoughtlessly spent. But obviously creating a budget and a travel budget at that, or an experience budget, high impact spending, when you're spending time with people you love and you're having experiences that you share with those people, that's what that's what life's all about. So for instance, I spent a month in Belize with my dad. It cost me a few grand to pay for him and it's some of the best money I've ever spent. So much so that we actually ended up doing 2 weeks in the Amazon together as well. So investing, if you're close with your parents or you want to become closer, consider going on a trip with them. Maybe it doesn't have to be 2 weeks in the Amazon or 1 month in Belize. Go on a weekend trip. If you have novelty, you have new experiences together, it triggers, things fire off in your brain. New experiences trigger memories. That's my definition of success. How many memories can I take away at the end of the day when I reflect back on my life? And creating memories with the people you love, that's the best money I've ever spent.
Yeah, I love that. And it actually reminds me of a financial advisor that I worked with. I didn't have an overall very good experience, but one of the things that he said that stuck with me was very similar. It was that, for the people that you care about, don't be afraid to spend money to create the experience that is necessary. So, I was a professional athlete at one point, and, you're earning a lot more than some of the people around you. So it's like, if you want everyone to be there for Thanksgiving and, instead of the stress and the struggle of trying to get someone to save up and do this and do that, like, figure out how to plan accordingly. You don't have to be the baller, just, writing checks all over the place, but plan your life around like, okay, I want to make sure that everyone can get here. I need to get 4 plane tickets instead of, just a plane ticket for myself. And you can save up and plan accordingly to make sure that you have those high impact experiences. And having your family together is pretty much priceless in comparison to what the plane tickets or whatever cost. But, sometimes those things happen kind of willy nilly, or they happen with anger or bitterness, or you got a job, you should be, covering it, or you just feel used because they're asking for it. Like, you make the decision that this is important to me and this is a thing that I want to spend my money on, and then you plan accordingly for those things. And I really appreciate that advice he gave me, because it has helped me throughout life to, like you said, spend in some areas that I probably wouldn't otherwise.
Yeah, I love that that resonates with you. And one quick thought to reinforce, like everything you just said was wonderful. I think growing up, I talk a lot about what my parents did not do right. One thing they did do right, every year we went on at least it was usually a 1 week vacation. So nothing to write home about, but it was consistent. Every year we took a 1 week trip down to Florida, and the memories we created as children with our parents of just spending simple days on the beach and having that quality time, those are some of the best memories of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And they found a way to make it happen. Even though they were living paycheck to paycheck, they found a way to balance living for today but still being secure for tomorrow. And that wasn't necessarily the best balancing act, because their tomorrow hasn't always been the most secure. But that's why I have a passion for helping people. It's about finding a balance between living for an epic today and a secure tomorrow. So that's the sweet spot. And yeah. So a little bit of a rant, but I just wanted to throw that in there. That was one thing they did right.
I love it. And I think that's, like you said, what all of these things are the sum of you being the owner of a company now that is helping people live this exact kind of life, or not exact, their own version of a life that is free, that allows them to be able to travel, that allows them to be able to have these high impact experiences. And so it's just a wonderful thing for it all to come full circle.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, we are headed toward what I like to call the final sprint. How's your sprinting abilities?
Oh, my sprinting abilities are not up to par with yours, Lauryn.
I mean, I do have pretty good sprinting abilities, if I do say so myself. Never fear. I feel like you can do this. At the end, you get a medal. You get to stand on the podium. So roll up your sleeves, get ready, touch your toes a little bit if you need to. What happens is I'm going to rapid fire some questions at you, and you just say whatever comes to mind.
All right. Sounds good. Let's do it.
Finish this sentence. That awkward financial moment when?
Oh, going family style at a restaurant. I never go in like my friends do. I think a lot of, splitting the check amongst a big group of people. I tend to be a thriftier person when I go out to eat, and a lot of friends don't approach it that way. They like to really make it a grandiose experience. So
kind of like I only had a side salad. That's what I'm paying for, not all these beers and drinks and appetizers.
That's right. So, bringing that conversation up and being the bad guy, it's never really fun. And, it's a little bit embarrassing too, because like as a kid, I think as a kid, there were times where I was shamed by friends for being too cheap, but really a lot of that was out of a necessity, not having too much. So anyways, that kind of circles back to childhood. Sorry, not a short answer. good we
habit,
can edit
though.
that somehow.
I think that's a great segue, though, because that was, like you said, overall, it's like, it takes a lot of courage to be able to be that person in that moment, and just to adhere to what your budget is. But while you have some good money habits, tell us what your worst money habit is.
Ooh, worst money habit. I would say not spending enough. Yeah. Some of these experiences, that scarcity mindset is something I've had to work on with therapy, and having meaningful conversations, therapists, coaches. There's opportunities. I've been able to go on incredible experiences, but there's been times where I haven't spent enough, and that scarcity mindset is dominated. So I am embracing more of an abundance mindset, and knowing that money will find its way back to me, and not be so paranoid or worried about parting with it.
I love it. Most meaningful gift you've ever received?
Most meaningful gift. That's a good one. I'm kind of blanking at the moment. Most meaningful gifts I've ever received. Yeah, I'm drawing a blank. I know if I reflected a little bit more, something would come up.
You're like, Lauryn, it's the most meaningful ever. How could I can't just say anything right now.
Yeah, it would probably stem back from, you know what, the most meaningful gift I've ever received would be my parents. Are we talking about something tangible? Because I'm probably going to go more in the feels.
You are allowed to say anything you want.
Okay. The most meaningful gift I've ever received is my parents' consistent love and attention.
I love it. So it's funny that you said, like, are we talking about something tangible? It's like most people don't say something that is tangible, which is what I love about that question, is that, you know, people think gift, thing, you know, Christmas, all this sort of, you know, tangible stuff or actual things. But most of the things that people say that are most meaningful are things that are intangible. Because money doesn't necessarily need to be around in order for you to receive something that's wonderful.
You nailed it. You know, tangible things are only going to get you so far. And the intangibles are really what hold the most value.
All right. Last but not least, can you share with us one thing that you would like to improve about your personal finances in the upcoming year?
Ooh, yeah. I would say embracing a better business mindset as a business owner. I've been a financial planner for 11 years. I launched my practice about a year ago, and I'm shifting from being a great financial planner to wanting to become a more savvy business owner. So that also requires investing in yourself. I'm investing in a coaching program, you know, business coach, a marketing coach. So being willing to part with money, knowing that you're investing in yourself, and that's the best possible thing you can do.
I like it. So what's the action item like to really make sure that this happens? We want to give permission. We want to give people permission to slide in your DMs, to email you, to use the contact form on your website and be like, hey, Jonathan, are you actually doing what you said? Like, what's the action item that's going to help you follow through on getting this done?
Yeah, the action item is, I think, having accountability with people you like, trust, respect. So having that coaching component offers a level of accountability. And with those people, also doing a fear setting. For me, as someone who's fearful of parting with money, I do, Tim Ferriss has this fear setting exercise. He's got a great TED talk on it. And I say, you know what? I've got X in savings. And if I part with 70% of it to get my business off the ground, what then? What's the worst thing that could happen? And I start to realize, like, you know what? If this business doesn't pan out, I could get a salary job somewhere else. Things will be okay. I can stand to lose this money. And that really helps get rid of the fear and get me in a mindset where I'm open to parting with that money and investing in myself, which is obviously the best investment you can make.
Yeah, that's helpful even for me, right? All right, we have made it to the finish line. You are a really good sprinter. I'm going to give your sprinting abilities an A+.
Oh, thank you.
Here is your medal. You get to stand on the worth listening podium. This is your time to shine. So go ahead and shout yourself out. Tell us how we can support you, where we can find you, what you're up to, anything you want to tell us. Go for it.
Absolutely. So you can find me at www.wonderwealthfp, as in financial planning.com, wonderwealthfp.com. Feel free to shoot me a message on there, book a time to chat for 30 minutes. I'm open to chatting, whatever. You got something coming up with you financial, or really I'm in the mindset. I'm reading this book called The Go-Giver. If you're not even in a place to work with a financial planner, but you're thinking about it, or you just want a financial planning question answered, or you just want to get started, I'm giving of my time. Check out my website. Book a 30-minute meeting. There's no pressure obligation to do anything with me. I just want to help move people along and give them the opportunity and education that my parents never had.
Amen to that. I love it. I love it. I love it. Jonathan, thank you so much for being on the show today. This has been a great episode of Worth Listening.
You're the best, Lauryn. I appreciate you having me on, and I'm a big fan of yours too. So love what you're doing. Thank you so much.